European Union has given its stamp of approval for the restructuring plans for 4 Spanish banks. This will clear the way for 37 billion euros of funding from the European Stability Mechanism. Well, David Roman is in Madrid. David, does this mean that the rescue of Spanish banks is finally underway?
Yeah, well, this stamp of approval means that Spanish banks finally will get the funding that they requested over the summer. In principle, there was this plan that some of this funding could come as emergency help for Spain in the last couple of months. It didn't happen, and the funding will be starting next month and will come mostly in the first half of 2013.
But that's an awful lot of money. I mean, 37 billion euros for just basically 4 banks. I know, Bankia is one of the biggest, and we'll talk about that later, but that's still a lot of money.
It is a whole lot of money. Most of these banks are very small. Most of them are savings banks that merge with other savings banks in the process of becoming commercial banks. And what they did was most of them, they just gave awful property loans to developers, and these developers, when the Spain's property sector crashed 5 years ago, they just ran out of money to pay back the loans.
So what are these banks promising to justify these loans?
Well, what the banks at the moment during the property boom, the banks were making a lot of money out of these loans. So at the moment, it looked like a very, very smart idea to just be so exposed to the construction sector, because pretty much everyone thought it would always go on forever.
In all, the Spanish banks have asked, or Spain, I should say, asked the ESM for a total of 100 billion euros. So that means there's still a big chunk left. Will this be enough to save the rest of the banking system, essentially?
Well, apart from these 4 banks, most of the rest of Spanish banks are sort of healthy. Some of them will request some help, probably minor amounts of money, and the rest, what they've done, they've been taking up provisions to cover the loans that they had. So they've been undergoing a pretty slow and painful process of getting themselves healthy. So the calculation is that not all of that money will be needed.
David, let's look at Bankia alone. I mean, exactly how bad is it, and what sort of steps is it going to have to take? Because that's the one that's going to affect people and the economy the most, I should imagine.
Yeah, Bankia is the worst case by far. It was Spain's 4th biggest bank when it went bust. This was like 6 months ago. And this bank was awfully exposed to property development along the Valencia coast, the Mediterranean, where you have lots of developments for foreign and Spanish tourists. The prices over there just crashed down over the last few years, and the parts of Bankia that were lending there, they were left tremendously exposed. So Bankia is going to take up like 2/3 of all of the funding, and it's definitely the biggest problem there.
I mean, David, there's also been some fallout elsewhere. I mean, I gather that some of the bondholders of these bank bonds actually have to take a hit as a result of the restructuring.
Yeah, that's one of the conditions set by the European Union to approve this help for Spanish banks, is that there is some sort of a private sector involvement, and this is falling down on junior debt holders, the people who had what they call preferred shares, paying pretty big interest rates on the capital invested. And most of them are retail investors, and most of them are actually customers of Bankia, who are taking pretty significant losses on their investments.
I mean, are those essentially Spanish citizens themselves?
Yes, it's mostly Spanish citizens, and some of them are foreigners, but mostly Spanish citizens.
But I guess they were, in a sense, were quite happy to take this hit because it's better rather than watching the banks go under entirely and basically losing their holdings altogether.
Well, that's right, but they're still not happy. Many of them have organized, and they're filing lawsuits, and they're protesting this. And the fact that they're taking up this haircut is going to be a complication for Bankia to push forward with its new development program for the next 4 years. They're going to be battling, people who complain about this for quite a while.
But I should imagine anyway, David, finally, that this really does suggest here that, the problems of the banks in Spain are finally being resolved.
Yes. The impression over here is that the sector, after a pretty slow process in which first they denied there was a problem and then they addressed the problem very, very slowly, it's finally getting healed. So it is fair to expect that, say, over the next year, most of the issues will be resolved, and the sector should be somewhat healthy, say, by 2014.
David, thank you very much indeed.